So the transparency in learning and teaching approach, or TILT, was developed by Mary-Ann Winklemas a number of years ago. And actually, this is a variant of some slides I created in 2024. The slides are new, or many of them are new, but I use the same URL because I just didn't want to have it have to create a new one because there's a lot of TILT ones out there, and I just happened to get it that year in January of that year. So I'm using the same URL, even though the slides are quite a bit different, but it still does work for those who were in the last session. And let me just drop that into chat too, because it might be helpful for you to have it, because there are some links in here. Well, there's at least one link in, a couple links in here that will probably be helpful. Okay, so and when you click on that, it'll ask you if you want to make if you want to make a copy of the slides. Just say yes, and it's all okay. I left the viruses out this time. And so, well, what are some of the major challenges we've all seen in our classes, or the things that faculty complain about the most in terms of students these days, or pretty much at any time? Anyone?
Student motivation.
Student motivation? Students don't read directions. Allison put in the chat. Anything else? Oh, well, actually, you have copies of the slides, so you can see what I put. Well, let me pull up the things I put. Student motivation. Another thing, certainly, which has gotten our attention a lot, is AI and academic integrity in the last few years, the last 3 years or so. And also, the gaps that we see in terms of the differences between first gen and continuing generation students, racial gaps, income gaps, and all sorts of other gaps in students, depending on their family background and so forth, and the demographic characteristics and where they happen to have gone to high school, has a dramatic impact on how successful they are. Um, and the tilt approach was basically designed to try to address all of these in some ways. Um, it's not going to help too much with students who don't read the directions, but it's going to make the directions perhaps a little bit clearer and more explicit, which can be helpful. So, one of the things that happens is that when we give students assignments, if we just do it write up an assignment in the way that perhaps was fairly traditional up until recently, was the fact that not everybody really has the same assignment, or students don't necessarily know what you expect. If you say, write a 10-page paper on this topic, you might get very different responses. Or if you ask them to do a critical analysis or a literature review, if they've never done any type of a literature review, or if you ask them to do an annotated bibliography and they've never seen an annotated bibliography, you might get things that are very different than what you expected from students. And I know when, in my earlier years teaching in particular, when I asked them to write an essay or a paper on a topic, some of them wrote superb papers and others didn't. And one of the reasons is some of them have had a lot more experience with that than other students have. And so we want to perhaps make clear to students what happens, because usually by the end of the term, after multiple drafts, if it's a semester long project, by the end of the term, most students were able to write really good papers. But I had to slog through a lot of really poor drafts in the beginning that might not have been so poor if they better understood what I was expecting them to do. So, I kept gradually adding more and more things, and the tilt approach is just a way of making this explicit. That the assignments we get don't always quite meet what we expected students to do. And the other point in terms of equity is that the students who are more likely to be able to write a good annotated bibliography are students who are more likely to have had practice doing annotated bibliographies. And that's going to depend, to a large extent, we are talking about this right before this started a little bit, on where they went to school. If you were in a school where a large proportion of the class was going on to college, you might have had more practice writing research papers or more formal papers. If you were at a school where you really didn't have to write any papers or very few, then perhaps you're not going to be able to meet the expectations of instructors if we haven't made that clear to our students. Um, and one of the problems in particular, and this is one that's been a long-standing issue, is that in those classes where there's three exams or three papers or one major paper at the end of the term, or maybe a midterm and a final, if students don't know what you expect on one of those, it could very well mean they're going to fail the course. And that's going to be tied to a large extent on where they happen to have been born and where they happen to go to school, and not necessarily aligned with how much they've learned and so on. So we want to structure things in a way so that first students are able to be successful from the beginning, and also perhaps may want to make some, you know, we may want to take into account that what we're really concerned with is how much students learn by the end of the term, not necessarily where they started with. So the tilt approach is designed to demystify the learning process so that, while we know what we want students to do, they don't necessarily. Um, it's designed so that students can optimize their learning. Instead of trying to focus on trying to figure out what you expect from students, the goal is to have students focus their efforts on the things you really want them to be learning and doing and demonstrating. And if they are instead spending a lot of their time on a guessing game in terms of that, they might make some wrong guesses and end up wasting time, and so on. Another good reason, by the way, for using scaffold assignments, because if you just tell students to write a term paper on a topic and you don't give them a lot of detail, they may go in a direction that's just not going to be very productive, in any case. So it's the purpose of the tilt approach is to help students understand how they're supposed to do something, but also why you are asking them to do these things. And it does reduce equity gaps. And the evidence on that is pretty overwhelming because many colleges have introduced this, of course, across the board, and they found it significantly increases their retention rates. It increases student grades. It reduces the racial and the first gen and all the other equity gaps that we observe in outcomes. There's three key elements of the tilt approach. One is the purpose of the assignment. The next is what is the task we're asking students to do? And the last is the criteria. And we'll talk a little bit about each of these. In terms of the purpose, the goal is you tell students why you're asking to do this. One of the things that's happened is that there's a lot of evidence that students are increasingly seeing a disconnect between what they're learning in their classes in high school and in college and their future life and careers and so forth. That students feel more and more disconnected from the content of their classes. And if they don't understand the purpose of why we're asking them to do certain things, then they're not as likely to put as much effort into it, and they might be more likely to let AI do it for them. So, explaining them that why they're being asked to do certain things, what types of skills are they going to develop, and why that may be helpful for them, is useful. That again makes it much more likely that students will put in the effort. And one of the ways that can help with that is by explicitly tying things to the NACE competencies, that career readiness type of thing, which is something that is nationwide becoming much more important in colleges as well as here. And there's a really nice summary of this, by the way, in a book that came out last year, called The Disengaged Teen, Helping Kids Learn Better, Feel Better, and Live Better. Rebecca Winthrop is doing a lot of work on these topics. She's one of the top NBER scholars. And Jenny Anderson also writes about these a lot. She's more of a journalist and news person. Okay, so the task, we want to make sure that students have clear step-by-step instructions. a really useful thing is to giving them exemplars of high quality work so that if you're doing similar assignments over time and you can either generate your own examples of that or let AI generate some good examples of student work, or you can ask students to perhaps share some of their work in future semesters. So if you have some really good student projects and you're going to be assigning similar projects, ask students for permission to share that in the future. But if you're going to do that, make sure they're varied because if you provide one example to students, you're going to get a lot of clones of that, which will be less interesting perhaps for the students. It reduces their creativity, their likelihood of being more creative in their assignments, and it gets really boring if everyone's doing the same type of paper, or the same type of statistical analysis or econometric projects or whatever it is you're doing. So, provide examples or provide a rubric. And also make sure that you state whether and how AI can be used in the assignment and also explain why as part of that. So that, if you might allow AI to be used in brainstorming. It might be used to help polish the work or whatever you believe is appropriate for the assignments you're doing and for the skills you're hoping students to develop. Be explicit about that. That's part of that transparency aspect of this. Um, and again, by carefully describing the task, you're putting all the students on a more equal starting point rather than being tied to their past training in high school and elementary school and so on. So everyone tends to benefit from using the tilt approach, and that's been shown in study after study. But the benefits are largest for those who are more likely to be left behind. For the students who come in least prepared, they gain the most when you're explicit in telling them what they need to be doing at each step. And again, it allows them to focus on the learning objectives and not on trying to guess what you want from them. And we also benefit from that because we don't get as many crappy assignments that we have to slog through when we're helping them, reach their final objectives and so forth. So I'd much rather read more polished work than really crappy work. While it's nice to see the difference between early stages of the process and the end, we do get some assignments that just do not meet at all what we were asking students to do. And that's partly perhaps because while we understood that, we may not have made that entirely clear to students. And the last part is the criteria. And a really useful thing there is the use of rubrics. And you can either share rubrics with your students or perhaps, and this is a really effective approach, co-develop the rubrics with the students unless you're being imposed there's some pressure on you to use all sorts of gen ed objective rubrics and other things and so forth. Talk to students about what's important, what they should be doing. And, if they help develop the rubrics and the criteria in terms of what they believe is important and they buy into that, they're much more likely to put in effort in trying to meet that. And they better understand criteria that they help develop. So co-developing or sharing or working with your students in developing the rubrics can be really helpful. And again, in describing the criteria, what is acceptable, what's exceptional, and what is below expectations. Be careful, carefully describe that. It doesn't have to be a long description, etc. But we don't want to really hide our expectations from students. That doesn't benefit us. We end up with much lower quality work, and it certainly doesn't benefit the students. Um, and again, the students who've had the most prior training in these types of things or most experience are going to do better. Okay, so in one of the studies that was done, and this was Mary-Ann Winklemas was one of the people who did that they introduced this in some gateway classes and others that were in some gateway classes, they introduced the tilt approach and others they did not. And they found that just doing it in one gateway, just introducing with just one assignment in a gateway class, it increased students' grades, it increased their persistence even up to 3 years later in that particular study, and it increased student motivation, and it increased student self-regulation using some of those standard measures of these things. Um, And again, what it's doing is it's taking that hidden curriculum of our expectations of what students should be doing and making it clear to students so that they can't say, "Oh, I didn't know that's what you wanted." It's just making it easier for students to be successful. Okay, so now, well, here's a question. Would doing this perhaps help shift students' focus to learning rather than grades? What aspects of the tilt approach? Well, will it? And if so, what aspect of it in terms of those three criteria, the task, the purpose, and the criteria? Any?
Did you ask a question, John? I didn't.
Yes. Yeah. So would the tilt approach perhaps help shift students away from perhaps relying on artificial intelligence to generate products that they submit?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'll answer. I guess maybe I'm not. I still didn't quite catch the question. To me, the biggest benefit of the tilt assignment is that you're just being totally clear on exactly what you want. And I should say that I don't know how much other people on in this meeting have used it. I've used it a lot, and I want to say that you can't just have. I mean, generally, what I do is I have some AI tool generate an assignment for me, a tilt assignment for me. But I use it mostly because I think that the AI tool really does a nice job providing the structure for the tilt assignment. I don't know that I'm as good at doing that, at least on my own yet, but I have to spend a lot of time inputting into AI what I want out of the assignment, and then I still have to wind up editing that tilt assignment. But I'm pretty confident that when I'm done, I will be able to provide to the students something that tells them exactly what they should do, exactly what the criteria are, and that way they can focus more and not having to guess what I want.
Mhm. Certainly does all those things, but the my thought on this, and again, this is something that hasn't really been empirically investigated, but my thought was that if students understand why you're asking them to do the project or that assignment, they might be more likely, they might see how it's going to be useful. And actually, that just showed up in chat as I started to say that. Yes, thank you. That, if students know why they're being asked to do something, they're more likely to be willing to do it if they think it's going to be helpful for them. If they think it's just busy work or a hoop they just have to jump through, then maybe they're less likely. But that's what I'm hoping at least will happen. It's nice to think that anyway, and I think it may very well work. Now, there's some links to it. Tilt Higher Wet Ed is a really nice website that Mary-Ann Winklemas have put together. One of the things on it is the assignment checklist, and we'll take a look at that in a moment. But first, I want to jump ahead to, I think there's one more thing here. Yeah, okay. Tilting in assignment GPT. Now, if you have a Chat GPT account, what I'd like you to try doing to see how this works is grab one of your assignments, open up Brightspace, find an assignment, or just write up an assignment in Notepad or Word or something, and just try. Let's just hop to here a little bit. It's a little GPT I put together last night, and what it does is it will convert an assignment into the tilt format. Does anyone have an assignment they'd like to put in there?
I do. I don't know. I do have a GPT account. I think I have an Ask GPT account. I don't.
Yeah, a free account works. And that's one of the nice things about ChatGPT. You can create chatbots for it that will work as long as people have an account. It doesn't have to be a paid account.
Oh, okay. Ask. Isn't it Ask Chat GPT? I have an account. Hopefully I'm logged in because I don't remember me. Just going to tell you right now. I
I
don't
usually just use
remember
my
the password.
Oswego account.
Okay. Well, okay. Where are you? Okay. it's Ask ChatGPT, right? It's
It's just chatgpt.com.
okay, but I think okay, is that the same thing? Okay,
Well,
so we go into
Allison, you have
ChatGPT.
an assignment.
Good,
Could you
yeah, all
just,
right.
would you like to just paste it into this or dump it into chat and I can paste it in either way?
Put assignment into tilt format. I know you actually designed one. Can I just ask it to do that? Do you think it'll know?
You could. Okay, let's just try this one. This is
Okay.
one from Allison. And let me just make it a little bit bigger. Oh, this is a nice assignment. Oh, this is a long assignment. Okay. Okay, let's just try it. I'm going to copy the chat into
John,
here. Yes.
the second half is the rubric, and it didn't come out looking like a rubric. So if you wanted to,
Well, actually, then, yeah, let me
Okay,
remove
I
that.
actually got mine to work. It's not in your ChatGPT if you
okay.
want.
Okay, well, actually, yeah, why don't you?
Do you want me to? Well,
Yeah,
I
why don't we
do.
let you share your screen?
Okay, hold on. Let me put it on the right screen. Okay. Um, okay. Share screen one. Okay, I'm going to share. Hold on, I'm putting it over. Here we go. All right. So this is a methodology paper. So this is Honors 200 Intro to Social Science. And
Oh,
the
okay.
paper
You
on the
already
left.
have it in this format, or no? Or did it just
No, I
create?
didn't. No, I didn't.
Okay.
I actually had just a description, a description is in a PDF file, right? That I'm going to hand out to
Mhm.
them, but I didn't really put it in TOEFL format.
Mhm.
So this paper, they're basically going to choose a research question, like a social science research question. They have to choose two disciplines, right? And then they're going to contrast the approach of this research question in the disciplines, right? Methodologies and things like that. So the purpose, right? The purpose of the assignment to help you understand different ways, compare methods, theories, assumptions, right? Stronger analytical skills and a clear understanding. By completing this paper, you will do so none of this was in my original description. So they basically come up with these objectives, right? And this is the task, right? So it has the task in 2 steps. Develop the research question, do a disciplinary analysis, comparative analysis, course concepts. So these steps are kind of things that I told them they would have to do and have to format it, etc. And then I did have a rubric attached. All right. So again, they
Okay.
get the content. So, right. So this tells them how they will be evaluated in this rubric writing citations. Right. And so the
And then
content,
it gives you,
right?
if
I
you,
recognize
it
the
does
content.
ask some questions at the end too.
Oh, where is it?
Right
Oh,
at the very end, right there.
oh,
So
it
it
just
gives you
says,
some,
oh, yeah. If you'd like, I can shorten it for a syllabus, adjust the language, add a checklist, right? Sample research questions, align it explicitly to SUNY learning outcomes or something like that.
so does it look reasonable?
It does. I mean, I think I had these steps here, right? But here, yeah. So this is interesting. Like in this disciplinary analysis, right? They kind of flush out. So someone's actually writing this section and don't really know how to approach it, right? Maybe not really the sophistication. So essentially, more vulnerable students now get some explicit questions like, can you answer these? Right. And at the very end, I think a checklist would probably, again, be helpful for a lot of students to make sure they have all the pieces, right? It has to develop a checklist. I think it's really the big difference for my assignment handout is they spend more time motivating it, right?
Yeah, if you click on the PDF, it should display that just so we could see the before and
Oh,
after.
sure. Okay. Right. So that's the rubric. Right.
Mhm.
Oh, this was
Oh,
the comparison paper. Okay, you know what? I actually didn't upload the one that described it. So that's
okay.
all based on the rubric.
So, and basically it's designed to take either the assignment and any information about learning objectives or rubrics, and it will, convert it. So try it again and let's just see.
Try it again
Paste in
with,
the assignment itself.
all right, well, let's see. Okay, hold on. Let me pop over. Let me find it. Okay, so content. Course information. Here we go, description. Okay.
You've already got a lot of good information in there, but not
I
all
do.
faculty have that.
But all right, so where did I go? Tilt conversion. Okay. Use this instead. Yeah, again, it's very similar, right? So it actually gives
Mhm.
kind of these objectives, or the learning objectives, which I didn't, I think, explicitly parse out like this. So that's probably the biggest change, right? The task, now they have the task of this is what the actual product will look like, right? And then this process, right? These process steps are pretty similar to what I already had in there.
Mhm.
So write your paper, discipline analysis, right? Comparative analysis, references, right? Criteria for success, and then appropriate use of AI.
And
Update,
then if you didn't have any rubric, it will offer to generate one.
right, it does, right.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that student, right, align the criteria for success to a grading rubric is offering, and then of course that student checklist as well.
See, one of the barriers that I've seen why I haven't converted more things over to a tilt approach is it takes a lot of time, and time is short. And one of the reasons I put this together is that, if we could use AI tools, and Steve's already doing this with individual prompts, but building a chatbot that does it might even be a simple way of doing it more efficiently, at least providing you with a starting point.
Mhm.
And if you also provide it with learning objectives for the course or for the module, then it's going to also align that with the learning objectives and describing the purpose, which can help make that connection more transparent.
I think too, and I wonder if this is how LLMs are trained. Like when you go in an LLM and say, I want to assign a paper. This is kind of what I want to do. Bear Down's methodology, right? I want them to pick a research question and be able to compare methodologies, generate, a sample handout of what that would look like when I explain the assignment to students. So, they generated something, then I edit it for things that I think are important or not, whatever, maybe length and all of that. And so that is what I just put into the Chat GPT. It was a different LLM that I used, but that's what I put in. So I feel like, looking at you, listening to you describe the approach, it's almost that the LLMs are already kind of using that, maybe they've trained a lot with that format, or I don't know. Um, they're
Well, the
not
tilt approach
explicitly
is
doing
used.
it, but a lot of the elements were there just by asking for them to do it.
Well, when I built the GPT last night, I did link it to the information from the Tilt Higher Ed website and so forth. Use that to train it so that it's automatically using those techniques.
Right.
And again, if you have, as you and Steve are both doing, if you're just using one of the large language models to generate assignments, just add an additional step at the end to convert it into tilt format.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. Like if you use a lot of low stakes stuff, are you really rolling out like a tilt thing for every low stakes assignment, or do you as a class? I mean, it just seems like for weekly discussion questions, every week, do I need to have a framework that motivates what they're doing? I don't know. Do we
well,
think that's overkill? Do we think they eventually just skip over it? Do we think the reminder's
they
good? I'm
might.
not sure.
Well, one nice thing is if you're using the same format for discussions, you do have the ability to create a discussion forum
Sure.
that has the common instructions, and then the topics would be the new
Right.
stuff. And once you created that once, it will just appear above the specific, work of
Right.
that week or that module. So
Yeah, I certainly am very repetitive in discussions. I don't know. Like sometimes problem sets or assignments just seem to be more self-explanatory, but I don't know. Because when we use like with the Lumen Learning Waymaker and all of that, they have the beginning where they sort of prime prior knowledge and things like that. But I wonder how much our students just start skipping over those parts and try to get to, the meat of the reading and things like that. I don't
yes, they skip over
know.
many parts, even the parts that are graded
Yeah.
sometimes. But yeah,
Yeah.
no matter how many reminders you send them, using intelligent agents, right? You have not yet completed these components, and but we do what we can.
Right.
Now, has anyone else tried this? Allison, did you try putting it in? I didn't quite get it too.
No, because I don't have a paid account, so I was wondering if you
Oh, well,
can
you,
either.
you don't need a paid account to use the
Okay.
GPT. So, let me see. Let me go back to where I was. Let me share the screen. Sharing this desktop. And here we go. So I pasted that in, but it had a bit more stuff in it. But let's see. So here's what it did. It created something where there was a lot of stuff. So it describes the reasons for it. To strengthen study skills, to build habits used in colleges and workplace, improve your independence as a learner, um, etc. And then here are the tasks, step by step, things to avoid, building reference sections, roadblocks to avoid. Um, yeah, so
Okay.
it seemed to work. And then you
Um,
can, modify it if it's not what you expected it to do.
yeah. So how would I get to this to use it? Because I'm in ChatGPT, just the free account.
Okay, if you click on the link that is shared in the slides, it should take you right to that now once you're logged in.
Okay, maybe you could.
Let me
Oh, the
see where.
Bitly one.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
got
yeah,
it.
right here, if you click on this, it should take you right
Okay.
into the GPT.
Oh, thank you.
And there's not a lot of information there because I did this kind of late last night.
All right.
But I was going to create one in Gemini, but I thought maybe some sleep would be good too.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Um,
And I also have a accessibility PDF assistant, all text generator, and other things I did for a workshop in Orlando a month or so, a couple months ago.
which slide is it on?
I
Number.
think the very last one, I think. Let's see. It's slide 13, which is the last one.
Oh, I'm missing that link on the
What?
slide.
Um, oh, maybe it doesn't put it, it has an extra animation. Try hitting the cursor key one more time. It doesn't have,
Um,
yeah, let me share a link to the slides.
okay.
Share. Oh, anyone with a link. I thought I had shared it that way. Let me try that again. Um, sorry, the chat screen got buried. There. That should give you the slides.
Okay.
Now, did that work, Allison?
Let me see. Yes. Yep.
Now, if you want some really good examples, we kind of blew by it, but if you go to this website, there are some really good examples of the tilt process and so forth. And there's some good videos. Um, and the site has changed since I looked at it last. Um, they had some really Okay, yeah. They have some good examples of before and after tilt approaches here. Um, and I'm not seeing it. Oh, here we go. Example assignment prompts. And so in each of these cases, to show you how it could be done, they show you what it looked like beforehand and then what it looks like after they have tilted the assignment. Okay, so the first one is the original assignment, which has a lot of detail. But it doesn't have, the three steps, the three components. And what they did is they rewrote it where this is a purpose, this is a task, criteria, and so forth. And by the way, another really good use of AI is to submit an assignment to AI. If you're not going to use Tilt, just say, are there any things that students are likely to misunderstand or that students may have trouble understanding in this? And it will give you, it will generally give you some suggestions on rephrasing things to improve the clarity, which is in general a good approach. Because again, what makes sense to us may not always make as much sense to our students. Because we've taken a few more classes and done a little more work with this than they have. But again, those examples are really good. So any other thoughts or questions about any of this? Stop the share. So
This is
Steve, you've
awesome.
been
Thank
using a
you.
tilt approach.
Mhm.
How has it been working with the tilt approach in your classes, Steve? Steve?
This is my first semester. Well, actually, no, I take it back.
Okay.
I used it. I used it last. I did use it last semester. It worked extremely well because the most important thing that it did was enabled me to. I used it just for discussion questions, and if students did not earn full credit on a discussion, I could point to the tilt assignment, and I asked it to create a rubric. I was able to point to the tilt assignment and to the rubric and make it clear what the learner did not actually do. And I definitely noticed that the quality of the discussion posts improved incredibly throughout the semester. What I think, and I guess maybe I'll throw this out for everybody out there. Maybe you won't find the same thing that I did. What I found was even though I created a tilt assignment, students, learners, whatever, did not always read it. They figured, okay, I know what the discussion question is. I know how to answer a discussion question. Boom, I'll answer it. And then when I graded the question, I was able to say, let's look at the rubric. This is what, let's look at the assignment. This is what you didn't do. Just the quality of the submissions really improved throughout the semester. And I did not at any point have somebody coming back to me and saying, you weren't clear. And even in the course evaluations at the end of the course, there was nobody who questioned whether I was clear, whether the requirements were clear, etc. Again, the biggest thing to me about the tilt assignment is that it just makes the criteria and the requirements 100% clear.
Very good. Has anyone else tried the tilt approach? In general, I've tried to improve the transparency of my assignments and so forth, but I haven't really put it very much in this format yet. But my plan is to do so, and that GPT was one of the things I was planning to use to help with that. And if you do play with that GPT and it's not doing something very well, let me know and I can tweak it a bit to see if it'll work better. Because again, it's been around since last night or early this morning or something like that. Okay, any other questions, comments, thoughts? Yeah, I wasn't sure how long to make this session. Normally, I did like a 20-minute session on tilt, and I wasn't sure how long adding the AI stuff into it would add to it. So, okay, well, we can stop. If you have any questions on this, let me know, and I'm happy to help. And we do have a session on creating your own chatbots if you want to try doing that. That can be helpful too.
Thank you as
Okay.
always, John.
Well, thank you. Good seeing everyone.
When is the
Oh, I
chat
actually,
session?
John, let me ask you a question, as long as you're here, rather than by email. I originally signed up for tomorrow's session.